Hello and welcome. You're watching Today in Parliament with me, Aishwarya, and here are the Parliament headlines. First phase of budget session to conclude today. Both houses to continue discussion on union budget. Finance Minister likely to reply to the debate in Parliament today. BJP issues a whip for its members. Vivad Se Vishwas Bill listed for discussion in Lok Sabha. Bill aims at reducing litigations in direct taxes payments. Was introduced in the lower house by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on 5th of February. Lok Sabha to take up Constitution Scheduled Tribes Order Amendment Bill for discussion. Report of Standing Committee on Labour to be tabled in both houses. First, a look at the legislative business in both houses of Parliament. A further discussion on the union budget will continue in the Rajya Sabha today. The discussion was initiated yesterday with several members participating in the discussion. And discussion on the union budget will also continue in the Lok Sabha. Well, today is the last day of the first phase of the budget session before it goes for a short recess. And the second phase of the budget session will be held from 2nd of March to 3rd of April. All right, so today is the last day for the first half of the budget session, and the second phase will be held from 2nd of March to 3rd of April. So what is expected in the day today? Let's get across all the details. Our colleague Kriti Mishra is now joining us live from Parliament. A very good morning, Kriti. Today it is a very important day. It is the last day of the first half of the budget session, and the most important, of course, legislative work would be the discussion on the union budget. And we understand that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is likely to reply in Parliament today. So tell us all the details today.
Well, Aishwarya, we've seen an erudite discussion in both houses of Parliament on Union Budget 2020 and 2021. Yesterday, the discussion was started in the upper house. Of course, the 0 hour and the question hour were suspended because more time could be allotted to discussion on Union Budget. And we saw how Congress member P. Chidambaram initiated the debate. He questioned government's roadmap on making India a $5 trillion economy and slamming all the opposition charges. Arun Singh of the BJP hailed government's moves on the economic front and also said that India is and the government is working towards making India actually a $10 trillion economy. We also saw that several members across party lines put forth their viewpoints. Now today, of course, it is expected that in the Lok Sabha, Finance Minister will reply to the debate and discussion around noon. And as far as the upper house is concerned, she's expected to reply around 4 in the evening. So a very important day because remember, the budget focused on aspirational India, the economic reforms and also caring for the society. It also announced several steps to boost agriculture, industry as well as exports. So a very important reply that would be made by Finance Minister in both houses of Parliament today. Aishwarya?
Absolutely. And in fact, we are hearing that also in the upper house, the question hour has been suspended and even it is likely that the lunch session would also be suspended so that the discussion on the union budget can continue. And Kriti, if we can talk about Lok Sabha now, there are two very important bills that we can see that is listed in Lok Sabha. Of course, the Vivad Se Vishwas Bill that is there, and there is also the Constitution Scheduled Tribes Order Amendment Bill that is listed for discussion today. Give us more details about these two bills.
Well, Aishwarya, you may recall that Vivad Se Vishwas scheme on direct taxes that was announced in the Union Budget by Finance Minister. Earlier, also, the government had brought in a similar scheme for indirect taxes that led to resolution of more than 180,000 cases pertaining to indirect taxes. Now, this particular bill, which is Vivad Se Vishwas bill, deals with resolution of direct taxes cases. Remember, Aishwarya, across the country, whether it is in Commissioner Appeals, the Supreme Court, or the High Court, more than 483,000 cases pertaining to direct taxes that are pending. So this bill will provide for resolution of such cases, and also the government has reiterated its commitment to ensure that the wealth creators in this country are respected. But remember, this will not apply to the cases on money laundering as well as Benami Properties and Prohibition Act. So this is a very important bill that would be taken up in the Lok Sabha today. And of course, you've mentioned about another important bill, which is the Scheduled Tribes Order Amendment Bill that leads to some changes in the tribes of Karnataka. Karnataka. So these two important bills would be taken up in the Lok Sabha today. Aishwarya?
All right, Kriti, thank you so much for all those updates there. And as Kriti was telling us, as far as legislative business in the Lok Sabha is concerned, there are two very important bills. The direct tax, the Vivad Se Vishwas Bill 2020 is listed for consideration and passing in the lower house. This bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman last week. Now, this bill aims at reducing litigations in the direct taxes payments, and under the Vivad Se Vishwas scheme announced in the union budget, the taxpayers whose tax demands are locked in dispute in multiple forums can pay due taxes by 31st of March and can get a complete waiver of the interest and penalty. Under the scheme, if a taxpayer is not able to pay within the 31st of March deadline, then he gets a further time till 30th of June. But in that case, he would have to pay 10% more on the tax. And apart from that, the Constitution Scheduled Tribe Order Amendment Bill 2019 is also listed for consideration in the lower house. This bill is aimed to further amend the Constitution Scheduled Tribes Order 1950 to include Karnataka's Parvera and also Talavara tribal community in the scheduled tribes category. The bill was passed by the Rajya Sabha in the winter session. And in the other legislative business in the Rajya Sabha, several ministers will lay papers pertaining to their ministries on the table. Let's take a look at some of them. Dr. Harshvardhan for the Ministry of Science and Technology. Shripad Yesu Naik for the Ministry of Ayush. Prahlad Singh Patel for the Ministry of Culture. Rajkumar Singh for the Ministry of Power. Ashwini Kumar Chaube for the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Anurag Singh Thakur for the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Union Minister Dr. Harshvardhan will make a statement regarding status of the implementation of the action taken by the government on the recommendations of the department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee on Health and Family Welfare on demands for grants 2018-19 pertaining to his ministry. And also members M. Shamugam and Ramna Ryan will present a report of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Labour on the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2019 pertaining to the Ministry of Labour and Employment. And a look at the other legislative business in the Lok Sabha. Well, following ministers will lay papers pertaining to their ministries on the table. Amit Shah for the Ministry of Home Affairs. Thawar Chand Gehlot for the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Dr. Harshvardhan for the Ministry of Earth Sciences. Giriraj Singh for the Ministry of Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairying. Rao Inderjeet Singh for the Ministry of Statistics, Program Implementation. Shripad Yesu Naik for the Ministry of Ayush and the Ministry of Defence. Jitendra Singh for the Ministry of Development of the Northeastern Region. Kiran Rijiju for the Ministry of Minority Affairs. Prahlad Singh Patel for the Ministry of Culture. R.K. Singh for the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. Hardeep Singh Puri for the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Mansukh Mandavia for the Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers and the Ministry of Shipping. Pagan Singh Kulaste for the Ministry of Steel. Arjun Ram Meghwal for the Ministry of Heavy Industries and Public Enterprises. VK Singh for the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. Danve Rao Sahib Dada Rao for the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution. Sadhvi Niranjan Jyoti for the Ministry of Rural Development. And Dhotri Sanjay Shamrao for the Ministry of Human Resource Development. Also Nityanand Rai for the Ministry of Home Affairs. Rameshwar Telly for the Ministry of Food Processing Industries. And Pratap Chandra Sarangi for the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises. Union Minister Nityanand Rai will also make a statement regarding the status of implementation of the recommendations contained in the Standing Committee report on Home Affairs on demands for grants 2018-19. And members Bhartruhari Mohtab and also Narbin Singh Saini will present the report of the Standing Committee on Labour on the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2019 pertaining to the Ministry of Labour and Employment. And also, members Prahlad Joshi and Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary will move a motion in agreement with the 13th report of the Business Advisory Committee presented to the House on 10th of February 2020. And with that, we wrap up this edition of Today in Parliament. Do stay tuned. The proceedings of the Upper House are going to commence in a short while from now at 11 a.m. Thanks so much for watching.